Welcome to Vital Life Stories. Today, we delve into a chilling tale of dark secrets, betrayal, and a justice long overdue. Rain poured heavily over the grand cemetery, washing away the superficial tears of those attending the solemn funeral of a respected man. He was known as a loving husband and successful entrepreneur, leaving behind a legacy that everyone deeply admired and constantly praised today. The mahogany coffin rested peacefully under a canopy, surrounded by beautiful white lilies that masked the rotting truth hidden deep inside him. Mourners whispered softly, sharing fond memories of his supposed kindness, completely unaware of the monstrous reality he had buried 10 years ago. Suddenly, the heavy iron gates of the cemetery groaned open, drawing the attention of the grieving crowd toward a mysterious, solitary figure. A woman in a dark trench coat walked slowly up the gravel path, her face completely hidden beneath a wide black hat. The rhythmic crunch of her footsteps silenced the murmurs, creating an eerie tension that wrapped around the bewildered attendees like cold steel. She stopped at the edge of the gathering, raising her head slowly to reveal piercing eyes filled with an ancient, burning fury. Gasps echoed through the damp air as older relatives recognized the scarred but familiar face of the man's supposedly deceased first wife. 10 long years had passed since the tragic accident that supposedly claimed her life, leaving him as a tragic, wealthy, grieving widower. She was not a ghost returning from the grave. She was a survivor, forged in the fires of absolute betrayal and pain. She arrived not to mourn the man inside the wooden box, but to dismantle the perfect facade he had so carefully built. The priest stopped his prayer as the woman walked directly toward the coffin, ignoring the confused whispers of the shocked, silent crowd. She placed a weathered leather journal on the polished lid, the loud thud echoing like a judge's gavel in a silent courtroom. 10 years ago, this beloved man drove her to a cliff, pushed her off the edge, and walked away without looking back. He wanted her immense wealth to pursue his twisted desires, believing the dark ocean waters would forever hide his truly gruesome crime. But fate had a different plan. She was rescued by a fishing boat, broken physically but fueled by an unstoppable, burning anger. She spent a decade healing in the shadows, gathering undeniable evidence of his corrupt dealings, affairs, and cold, calculated murder attempt. The current widow standing by the grave stared in absolute horror as the dark truth finally began to unravel before her eyes. The returned woman opened the journal, reading aloud his handwritten notes that detailed the exact, horrifying plan to eliminate her that night. Every single word she spoke shattered the peaceful illusion of the funeral, replacing sorrow with an overwhelming sense of disgust and betrayal. Friends who had just praised his generosity now stepped back from the grave, looking at the expensive coffin with pure, unhidden revulsion. The carefully constructed empire of lies was crumbling in real time, destroyed by the very person he thought he had successfully erased. A heavy silence fell over the cemetery again, broken only by the sound of rain hitting the umbrellas of the stunned crowd. She turned to face the attendees, her voice steady and calm, carrying the weight of a decade spent living in absolute obscurity. The police had already received copies of the journal, along with financial records proving he had stolen millions from his closest partners. He died of a sudden heart attack, escaping the cold iron bars of a prison cell. But he could not escape this. This public execution of his legacy was far more devastating than any legal punishment he could have ever faced in a courtroom. The irony was beautifully cruel. A funeral meant to honor his life had transformed into a brutal tribunal, exposing his darkest sins. The second wife collapsed onto a nearby chair, weeping not for her husband, but for the monstrous lie she had unknowingly lived. Business associates hastily checked their phones, realizing their companies were now deeply entangled in the massive fraud scheme exposed by the widow. The dead man's portrait, smiling warmly beside the coffin, now looked like the arrogant smirk of a devil caught in his trap. She walked over to the portrait, picked it up, and threw it into the open grave, letting it smash into the mud. No one stepped forward to stop her. They simply watched as the symbol of his fake goodness was rightfully destroyed and buried. The woman then pulled out a small silver necklace from her pocket, the exact one he had forcefully ripped from her neck. She dropped it onto the coffin lid, a final return of the agonizing past she had carried with her for 10 years. Her revenge did not require violence or bloodshed. It only required the pure, undeniable truth brought into the unforgiving light of day. The priest, trembling slightly, closed his holy book, realizing that no prayer could ever cleanse the profound wickedness resting in that box. The funeral director stood frozen in the background, unsure if he should proceed with the burial or wait for the police arrival. Sirens began to wail faintly in the distance, a fitting choir to accompany the dramatic conclusion of this incredibly dark, twisted saga. The flashing blue and red lights soon reflected off the wet tombstones, signaling the arrival of the authorities to secure the scene. Detectives stepped out of their vehicles, walking briskly toward the gathering, their eyes fixed on the woman who had orchestrated this revelation. She greeted the lead detective with a calm nod, handing over the original journal and a USB drive containing all digital evidence. The officers immediately began questioning the business partners and the second wife, turning the solemn funeral into an active, chaotic crime scene. The dead man could no longer defend himself. His voice was permanently silenced, leaving his victims to finally rewrite his entire history. His immense wealth, built entirely on blood and deceit, would soon be seized, dismantled, and returned to those he had deeply wronged. The woman watched the chaos unfold with a profound sense of peace, feeling the heavy burden of the past finally lifting away. She had reclaimed her stolen identity, stepping out from the cold shadows of death to stand victorious among the living once again. The rain slowly began to stop, and a faint ray of sunlight pierced through the thick, gray clouds hanging over the cemetery. It was a symbolic end to the dark storm that had consumed her life, bringing a warm, gentle light to her soul. She buttoned her trench coat, adjusted her wide black hat, and turned away from the open grave without a single backward glance. The crowd parted silently, creating a clear path for her, their eyes filled with a mixture of deep respect and lingering fear. She walked back down the gravel path, her footsteps light and purposeful, leaving the ruined legacy of her tormentor far behind her. As she passed through the heavy iron gates, she felt the crisp, fresh air fill her lungs, signaling a brand new beginning. The cemetery workers finally approached the coffin, their faces grim as they prepared to lower the disgraced man into the cold earth. There were no final words spoken, no tears shed, and no flowers tossed into the deep hole as the dirt covered him. He would forever be remembered not as a great leader, but as a cowardly monster who ultimately failed to escape his karma. True justice is a patient hunter. It may be delayed for years, but it always arrives exactly when it is most devastating. The woman drove away from the cemetery, her rearview mirror reflecting the flashing police lights that marked the end of his era. She drove toward the beautiful coastline, the very place where her life was supposed to end in darkness 10 long years ago. Parking near the rocky cliff, she stepped out of the car, listening to the powerful, crashing waves that had once saved her. The vast ocean stretched endlessly before her, a majestic reminder of her incredible resilience and the limitless possibilities of her future life. She took a deep breath, letting the salty sea breeze wash over her face, feeling truly alive and completely free at last. The scars on her body remained, but they were no longer marks of a victim. They were proud badges of a warrior. She had proven that the truth cannot be buried forever, even under 6 feet of dirt or deep within the darkest ocean. Her story would soon spread across the city, serving as a powerful warning to anyone who believed they could outrun their sins. The perfect murder does not exist, and the ghosts of the past will always find a way to return and demand retribution. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, she smiled warmly at the horizon. She had lost a decade to pain and hiding, but she had gained an unbreakable spirit that no one could ever destroy. The dark chapter of her life was officially closed, and a blank, beautiful page awaited her in the journey that lay ahead. She returned to her car, starting the engine smoothly, ready to fully embrace the peaceful life she had fought so hard for. The road ahead was clear, illuminated by the fading twilight, guiding her away from the shadows and toward a bright, promising tomorrow. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of truth, resilience, and the undeniable power of justice finally finding its way. We hope this story inspired you. Subscribe to Vital Life Stories for more captivating tales, and we will see you next time.